Picture this. You're checking your phone every 10 minutes, hoping she replied. Meanwhile, she's out with friends, barely thinking about you. Now flip that image. She's the one checking her phone, wondering why you haven't responded. That role reversal isn't luck, it's strategy. And I'm about to show you exactly how to make it happen. But before we dive deep into this, I need you to do something for me right now. Hit that like button, because what I'm about to share with you goes against everything society has taught you about dating. And if you're new here, subscribe and turn on notifications, because I break down female psychology in ways most men never get to understand. Trust me, you don't want to miss what's coming in the next videos. Now, let me tell you something that might sting a little. I've watched this pattern play out hundreds of times. A guy meets a woman he's attracted to. They exchange numbers. Everything feels promising. Then slowly, he becomes the one waiting, hoping, analyzing every text delay. And she? She moves on with her day like nothing happened. I'm going to be completely honest with you about how we women operate, because I've been on both sides of this dynamic. I've been the woman who lost interest because a man was too available, and I've also been the one checking my phone obsessively when a man knew exactly how to keep me intrigued. The difference wasn't in looks, money, or pickup lines. It was in understanding a fundamental truth about attraction. Scarcity creates value. Let me take you back to a moment that changed everything for me. I was dating this guy, let's call him Marcus. Marcus was good-looking, had a stable job, treated me well. But something was off. Every time I pulled back even slightly, he'd double down. More texts, more attention, more effort. At first, I thought it was sweet. Then it became suffocating. Then it became invisible. I stopped seeing him as a challenge and started seeing him as a given. And that's when I lost interest. Months later, I met someone completely different. This man, let's call him David, did something Marcus never did. He had boundaries. When I took hours to respond, he didn't panic. When I suggested plans, sometimes he'd say he had other commitments. He wasn't playing games. He was simply living his life. And you know what happened? I became obsessed. Suddenly, I was the one initiating conversations. I was the one suggesting we meet up. The power dynamic had completely flipped, and I didn't even realize it was happening until I was already hooked. That's when I understood the psychology behind attraction on a level most people never grasp. We women are taught to value emotional connection, communication, and availability. But deep in our subconscious, there's something else at play. We're drawn to what we can't fully control. Not in a manipulative way, but in a way that signals strength, independence, and high value. Think about it from an evolutionary perspective. For thousands of years, women needed to select men who could provide security, not just physical resources, but emotional stability. A man who fell apart every time she wasn't around, that signaled weakness. But a man who remained steady, who had his own purpose and direction regardless of her attention, that signaled strength. And strength is attractive. Now, I know what some of you are thinking, but I don't want to play games. I want genuine connection. And I completely understand that. Here's the thing, though. What I'm talking about isn't about manipulation. It's about self-respect. It's about not abandoning yourself the moment a woman enters your life. Because when you make someone your entire world, you actually become less attractive to them. Not because they're cruel, but because attraction requires mystery, space, and a sense that you're someone worth pursuing. Let me break down what happens in a woman's mind when a man is too available. At first, we appreciate the attention. It feels good to be wanted. But then something shifts. We start to wonder, if he's this available to me, what does that say about his life? Does he have goals? Does he have friends? Does he have purpose beyond me? And when those doubts creep in, attraction starts to fade. Not consciously, but it happens. On the flip side, when a man maintains his ground, when he shows that he has a full life that she's being invited into rather than being the center of, everything changes. Suddenly, she's wondering about you. She's thinking about what you're doing when you're not with her. She's noticing the little things about your life that indicate you're not desperate for her validation. And that curiosity, that's the beginning of obsession. I remember this one conversation I had with my friend Sarah. She was dating a guy who would literally cancel his plans the moment she texted. He'd drop everything to see her. She told me it made her feel guilty, not special. I feel like I'm his whole world, and it's too much pressure, she said. 2 months later, she ended things. Not because he did anything wrong, but because there was no tension, no chase, no reason to wonder about him. Compare that to another friend, Jessica, who's now married to a man who understood this principle perfectly. When they first started dating, he made it clear he enjoyed her company, but wasn't going to rearrange his entire life. If he had plans with his friends, he kept them. If he was working on a personal project, he'd let her know he needed that time. Jessica admitted to me that it drove her crazy at first, but in a good way. She found herself trying harder to get his attention. She started planning dates around his schedule. She became invested in a way she never had before. And now, she calls him the love of her life. So how do you create this dynamic without being cold or playing games? It starts with genuine self-investment. You need to build a life that's so compelling that a woman's presence is a bonus, not a necessity. When you have goals you're actively pursuing, hobbies that fulfill you, friendships that matter, and a sense of purpose beyond dating, you naturally become less available. Not strategically unavailable, but authentically occupied. Here's what that looks like in practice. When she texts you, you respond, but not immediately every single time. Why? Because you're actually doing something with your day. You're at the gym, you're working on a project, you're having dinner with friends. Your life doesn't pause because she sent a message. This isn't about making her wait for the sake of it, it's about genuinely having things going on that command your attention. When she suggests getting together, sometimes you say yes, and sometimes you already have plans. This creates something powerful in her mind. It shows her that your time has value, that access to you isn't guaranteed, and that she needs to put in effort if she wants to be part of your world. And women, we respect that. We're drawn to it. I'll tell you something most men don't realize. Women can sense desperation from a mile away. We feel it in how quickly you respond. We feel it in how easily you change your plans. We feel it in the energy you bring to interactions. And desperation, no matter how it's dressed up, kills attraction faster than almost anything else. But confidence, real confidence that comes from knowing your worth, that's intoxicating. And confidence isn't about arrogance or playing it cool. It's about being so secure in yourself that you don't need constant validation from her to feel okay. It's about understanding that if things don't work out with her, you'll be fine, because your happiness isn't dependent on her attention. Let me share something that might surprise you. The times I've been most attracted to men weren't when they were showering me with attention. It was when they were so absorbed in something meaningful that I had to work to get their focus. There was this guy I dated briefly who was launching his own business. He was passionate, driven, and completely consumed by his vision. When we'd make plans, he'd show up fully present, but I always knew that his business was his priority. And instead of making me feel less important, it made me more attracted to him. I wanted to be part of his world. I wanted to support his dreams. I became invested because he wasn't desperate for me to be. That's the shift you need to make. Stop seeing a woman's attention as the prize and start seeing your own life as the prize. Because when you do that, when you truly embody that mindset, women notice. They feel the difference. They sense that they're dealing with a man who knows his value, and that's magnetic. Now, here's where this gets practical. When she starts to distance herself, when her texts become less frequent or her energy shifts, most men panic. They start chasing harder, asking what's wrong, trying to fix things. But here's what actually works. You match her energy and then go slightly cooler. Not in a petty way, but in a way that shows you're not rattled by her distance. You pull back your attention, you refocus on your own life, and you let her feel your absence. What happens next is fascinating. She starts to wonder. She starts to miss the attention she was getting. She begins to question whether she made a mistake by pulling away. And slowly, often without even realizing it, she starts reaching back out. She initiates conversations. She asks about your day. She suggests getting together. The power dynamic has flipped, and you didn't have to beg, convince, or chase. You just had to remain steady. I've seen this happen so many times, it's almost predictable. A woman loses interest because a man is too available. He finally stops chasing. She feels the absence. She reaches back out. And suddenly she's more invested than she was before. Why? Because she had to work for it. Because his attention wasn't guaranteed. Because she realized that what she took for granted was actually valuable. But here's the crucial part that most men miss. This isn't about manipulation or revenge. It's not about making her suffer or teaching her a lesson. It's about establishing a healthy dynamic where both people value each other's time and presence. It's about mutual respect, not power games. When you operate from this place, from genuine self-worth rather than strategy, everything changes. Your interactions become more authentic because you're not performing. You're not trying to play it cool or calculate your responses. You're simply living your life and allowing her to be part of it on terms that respect both of you. I want to address something important here. Some of you might be thinking, but what if I lose her by not being available enough? And my answer is this. If you lose her because you have boundaries and a life outside of her, she wasn't the right woman for you anyway. The right woman will respect your independence. She'll be attracted to it. She'll see it as a sign of strength, not rejection. Think about the type of relationship you actually want. Do you want to be with someone who only values you when you're chasing them? Someone who loses interest the moment you show genuine care? Or do you want to be with someone who appreciates your time, respects your boundaries, and is attracted to your strength? The dynamic you create in the beginning sets the tone for everything that follows. Here's something I've noticed in my own relationships. The men I respected most were the ones who had clear boundaries from the start. They didn't bend over backwards to accommodate my every whim. They had their own lives, their own goals, their own sense of identity that existed independently of me. And instead of pushing me away, it drew me closer. I felt safe with them because I knew they wouldn't lose themselves in the relationship. Compare that to the men who made me their entire focus. At first it felt flattering, but quickly it became exhausting. I felt responsible for their happiness. I felt guilty when I needed space. I felt trapped by their dependence on my attention. And inevitably, I pulled away. Not because I wanted to hurt them, but because the dynamic was suffocating. So when I tell you to flip the script, to become the one she's chasing instead of the one doing the chasing, I'm not telling you to be cruel or distant. I'm telling you to value yourself enough that you don't abandon your life for someone who hasn't earned that level of priority yet. I'm telling you to build something so meaningful that a woman's attention is a welcome addition, not a desperate need. Let me paint you a picture of what this looks like in real life. You meet a woman you're interested in. You have great conversation. You exchange numbers. Instead of texting her constantly over the next few days, you reach out when it feels natural. You suggest getting together, but you don't rearrange your entire schedule to make it happen. You find a time that works for both of you. When you're together, you're fully present. You listen. You engage. You create genuine connection. But when you're apart, you're focused on your own life. She texts you during the day. Sometimes you respond right away if you're free. Other times it takes a few hours because you are at the gym, at work, or focused on something else. You're not calculating your response time to create anxiety. You're simply living your life. And she notices. She notices that you're not sitting around waiting for her messages. She notices that you have things going on. She notices that your world doesn't revolve around her. And that makes her want to be more involved in it. When she suggests plans, but you already have something scheduled, you don't immediately cancel to accommodate her. You let her know you'd love to see her and suggest an alternative time. This does something powerful. It shows her that while you value her, you don't value her to the detriment of everything else in your life. And women, we find that attractive. We want to be important, but we don't want to be everything. That's too much pressure, and it signals that you don't have a strong foundation. Here's what I want you to understand on a deeper level. Attraction isn't logical. It's not about who's nicer, who tries harder, or who cares more. Attraction is about emotions, and emotions respond to certain triggers. One of the strongest triggers is the sense that we might lose something valuable. When you're too available, there's no sense of potential loss. You're always there. You're guaranteed. And humans, we don't value what we can't lose. But when you maintain your independence, when you show through your actions that you're a complete person with or without her, you create something she can potentially lose. And that potential loss makes her pay attention. It makes her invest. It makes her chase. I've done this myself with men, and I can tell you exactly what goes through a woman's mind when a man does this correctly. At first, she might not even notice. She's used to men being available, so your slight distance doesn't immediately register. But then she goes to text you and realizes you haven't texted first in a while. She sees you're active on social media, but you haven't liked her recent posts. She remembers you mentioned you had plans this weekend, but you didn't tell her what they were. And slowly, curiosity builds. She starts wondering what you're doing, who you're with, whether you're thinking about her. And this is where the psychology gets interesting, because now she's the one investing mental energy. She's the one thinking about you during her day. She's the one checking her phone to see if you've reached out. The dynamic has completely flipped, and it happened naturally, because you simply stopped making her your priority before she earned it. Now, I need to be clear about something. This approach only works if you're genuinely okay with the outcome either way. If you're doing this as a tactic to manipulate her into wanting you, she'll sense it. Women are incredibly intuitive. We can feel when someone's playing games versus when they're genuinely secure in themselves. The energy is completely different. When you're truly focused on your own life, when you're genuinely building something meaningful, when you honestly are okay with or without her attention, that energy is authentic. And authenticity is attractive. But when you're secretly checking your phone every 5 minutes while pretending you don't care, when you're carefully calculating every response to create a certain effect, that energy is manipulative, and women can feel it. So the real work isn't in learning techniques or strategies. The real work is in building a life you're genuinely proud of. It's in developing goals that excite you independent of dating. It's in creating friendships that fulfill you. It's in finding purpose that drives you. When you have all of that, becoming the one she chases isn't a strategy. It's a natural byproduct of being a high-value man. Let me share one more example that really drives this home. I know a guy who completely transformed his dating life, not by learning pickup techniques, but by genuinely getting obsessed with his goals. He started a fitness journey, not to attract women, but because he wanted to feel strong. He began learning a new skill because it interested him. He reconnected with old friends because he valued those relationships. And something amazing happened. Women started noticing him. But here's the key. He wasn't trying to get their attention. He was just living his life in a way that was compelling. And that made him magnetic. Women could sense that he had something going on, that he was moving in a direction, that he had purpose, and they wanted to be part of it. He went from chasing to being chased, not because he learned some trick, but because he became genuinely interesting. That's the real secret behind all of this. You don't need to manipulate women into wanting you. You need to become the kind of man women naturally want. A man with purpose. A man with boundaries. A man who values himself enough that he doesn't need constant validation. A man who's building something meaningful that a woman would be lucky to be part of. When you embody that, the phone flip happens automatically. She goes from being the one with all the power to being the one hoping you'll respond. She goes from barely thinking about you to wondering what you're doing. She goes from taking you for granted to realizing you're someone she doesn't want to lose. And the best part? You didn't have to beg, convince, or chase. You just had to respect yourself enough to not abandon your life for someone who hadn't earned that level of priority. So here's my challenge to you. Stop focusing so much on her and start focusing on yourself. Build something you're proud of. Develop skills that excite you. Create a life that's so fulfilling that a woman's attention is a bonus, not a necessity. And watch how quickly the dynamic shifts. Watch how quickly you go from being the one checking your phone every 10 minutes to being the one she can't stop thinking about. Because at the end of the day, attraction isn't about tricks or tactics. It's about value. And when you increase your value, when you become the prize, everything else falls into place. Women chase what they value. And when you value yourself, they'll value you too. Now, before you go, I need you to do something. If this resonated with you, if you're finally starting to see dating and attraction in a completely different way, do me a favor. Hit that like button right now. Leave a comment below telling me about a time when you were too available and it backfired, or when you pulled back and suddenly she became more interested. Your story could help another man going through the same thing. And if you haven't already, subscribe and turn on notifications. Because what I'm sharing with you in these videos, this level of honest female psychology, you won't find it anywhere else. The next video is going to blow your mind even more. I'm going to break down the exact signals women give when we're secretly obsessed with a man but trying to hide it. You don't want to miss that. I'll see you there.